This is our 60th reunion. Cameron Gamble is the officiator. Ed Stock did a blessing, and on we went.
But I certainly think that you all ought to be congratulated on what you've done so far. On page 3, there's a whole list of everybody that volunteered and gave their time to make sure this was successful. And finally, we have a non-55 graduate who we all know and know that we rely on him for making sure who's still around and where people are, and that's Melvin Foremost.
Thank you. It's fine.
I rely on Melvin's email to make sure I'm still there. Start thinking about, you can't remember what you had for breakfast, but you do wake up every morning remembering Fats Domino songs, and remembering what you did in prom, and what time you got in, and who you went with. So I thought it'd be a nice thing if we passed the mic around and everybody took a chance to stand up and say, what is it that brought you back to this city? Why did you come back? It has to be that you have fond memories of being in high school at Fortier in the mid-50s. I think we all agree that the mid-50s was a nice, simple, great time to grow up. And you're growing up in high school. So what do you remember about your high school that makes you love it so much? I had some questions about remembering things at high school. I want to know, did anybody remember the name of the janitor family that lived in the house right behind the school on Nashville? Paternoster.
Only you could remember that.
People that, anybody that was in, how many people were in Miss Collins' English class? A few of you. I want to know if you remember. Remember they had a front door and a back door in those classes. And in the back of the room, in the last row next to the door, a chair next to the door, in Miss Collins' English class, there was a tall, skinny fellow, must have been about 19 years old, that would come in and sit down in there and open up the morning newspaper and start reading the newspaper. Miss Collins would say, Mr. So-and-so, would you put your newspaper down? He'd put it down for a second, and then a minute later he'd pick it up and start reading it again. And then later on in the class, Mr. So-and-so, I told you to put your newspaper down. Out of all of you that were in that class, do you remember that man's name? I sometimes wonder. I think about him every now and then, because I was in that class, and I always was kind of in awe of a guy that would come to class in high school and read the newspaper throughout the class. At least it showed he did understand English. And I often wonder why I don't remember his name. There were 2 entrances to the school. Three really, with Ferret Street. One on Nashville, there was another one on Joseph Street. And at 8:30, they'd open the doors and you could go up in the school, I think. But for some reason, people would hang out outside the door on Nashville, the Nashville entrance, or they'd hang outside the door on the Joseph Street. I always was in the Nashville entrance. And I've always regretted that I didn't go over to Joseph Street and see who was over there. That's a whole group of people that I just didn't really hang out with in school. Y'all remember hanging out in front of the door? When I came to school, and I'm going to tell you this one story, and then we're going to start passing this mic around, and everybody can talk about whatever they want to talk about. Make it short. Don't tell us any stories about cruise trips that you've taken. When I came to school, it was a 4-year boys' school. And as a freshman, when I first got walking the halls, I came out of St. Martin's. I was a little uptown swell that had gone to a private school, and I go to Fortier. I'm walking in the hall, and this guy comes up to me and tells me he wants my math homework. I said, what? He said, I want your math homework every day. I said, well, I don't have any today, but see you tomorrow. And I went and asked somebody, and they told me he was the finest, most vicious street fighter in the Irish Chapel. So I started giving him my math homework. He didn't do him a whole lot of good, I'm not sure, because I was not very good in math, and I assumed that he thought that a U on the homework meant that it was unusually good. Later in the year, the school board decided to change the school setup from 4 years to 3 and make the high schools co-ed. Get rid of Mr. Lee, who was the principal at Fortier, and bring in Ms. McShane as principal. And Warren Easton, Fortier, Nichols, maybe Peters, the boys in all those schools decided to protest. They were going to go down, and they marched down. They went down to Canal Street and formed a big, maybe the first protest I'd ever heard of. They formed a protest to march on the school board. Well, when you came to school, I came to school that morning, and as I came to school at Nashville Avenue, going to school, standing at the door was one of the football players. And he said, "You can't come to school today. You've got to go downtown and get in this march because we protested." Well, I don't remember who it was, but I know I was equally awed by the football player. And although I didn't know if they were as vicious a street fighter as this fellow that was getting my homework, I knew that I wasn't going to tell Wilbur Trosclair, "No, I'm not going down there." And so what I did was I went home. Nobody went to school because the football players wouldn't let them go in school. So I went home instead of going down and marching because I was in favor of making it co-ed. Because I figured that would reduce my chances of getting beat up and not having I figured that it would cut it in half. Well, that shows you how good it was in half, because bringing all these girls in didn't reduce the number of boys in the school. They still had the same number there that could bully me into giving them no homework. What I didn't understand was actually it increased it by 2. Because the next year, a girl came up to me and bullied me into giving them And I thought that rather than just knowing that a girl was bullying me to give her homework was so embarrassing that she didn't even have to threaten to beat me up. Everybody has fond memories of this stuff. And I think everybody ought to have a chance to repeat it. What I'm going to do is can you all hear this? Yeah, this is working in. Right. We're going to start handing this around. Everybody had a chance to talk.
Camille Ohms, married to Phil Thomas.
Camille Ohms Thomas. I live in Florida. I brought my husband Phil with me. We have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. And I stay busy picking them up and driving them around, and also playing bridge, winter different clubs, road club, water aerobics, and also active in my church. So I'm happy to be here seeing all those old friends. Good to see you all.
Classmate Ann Munch Thomas, now Ann Munch Talk.
Can you hear it? Okay. All right, thank you. Anyway, I was asked to tell this story about kind of a zany date I had with the Fortier guy while I was there. And double date with Ken Toole, who was John Kennedy Toole, the author of the prize-winning book, Confederacy of Dunces. And Ken was known for his humor. It was quite a humorous evening. We went down to the famous store to hear Dukes of Dixieland, and that was fun. We all had our lemonades, and when it was time to pay the bill, Ken didn't have his wallet, and the other fella didn't have enough money to pay the bill. And girls didn't carry money in those days except enough to call home. And I couldn't call home because I wasn't supposed to be in the French Quarter in the first place. So we sat there and nursed our lemonades while Ken went out to see who he could find or what he could do about getting some money. And after a while, he did come back with enough money to pay the bill. So we were able to leave the main store, but then we had the car in a parking lot. Didn't have any money to get that out. So we stood by Pat O'Brien's, and Ken was able to get enough money to do that. So that was the only time I ever had a date with a Fortier guy who didn't have money to get his car out of the parking lot, because Jerry Dillard always had enough money to get his daddy's Cadillac out of the lot.
Classmate Ed Stock.
I want to give the other side to the story of getting into Fortier on that day when we had the strike. My father heard about the strike, and my father is a German who abides by rules and regulations, and he said, "You're going to go to school today." I said, "I can't go to school today. I'd be embarrassed." He said, "You're going to school today, and I'm going to drive you to school. I'm going to walk in with you." And so I got there, and there was a football player or two. But my father said, "We're going through, son." So Mr. Lee was standing there, and he said, "Where does my son go?" And Mr. Lee had to think, because there weren't any students. Well, there weren't many, but I did go up the stairs, and finally, after a couple of hours, we had about 10 or 15 guys in a classroom. We had the longest homeroom study hall of my career at Fortier, but my father wasn't going to take no from an answer from any student. So I was looking forward to the genders being mixed, but my father made sure I was in school.
Next day.
I'm Gary Hauser, and of course I had a wonderful time at Fortier in those
Put it up,
days.
you have to hold it close to your mouth.
I'm Gary Hauser, and I had an awfully good time at Fortier in those days. Didn't spend as much time studying as I should have, needless to say, but it was really, we had great friends, good times. 50s was a special time for America, I think, and it was really great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jerry Perry. Fortier has always been very, very close to my heart. And although I've been a Yankee since I graduated, I come back as often as I can. Dick asked me to think about a story, and I thought I would share one with you that I think is very humorous. You may know I'm a musician, flute player, and that was my passion from the time I picked up the pipe until today. So we were playing, Peter Demborian chose a wonderful piece, I think it was for the spring concert in 1954, and it was the Bacchanal from Samson and Delilah. And we started around Christmas time. There was this wonderful kid by the name of Bill Hobbs, who was our oboe player. He had to work very, very hard to make the oboe sound like the oboe should sound. And I got the job of spending time with him. Yeah, I should say too, the solo was very demanding, very, very difficult. And I got the job of going and coaching him and working with him and enjoying being with him as he was learning this wonderful solo. And so he worked, played very well. So comes the concert, and Peter Demborian starts conducting this wonderful concert, and Bill starts this beautiful solo, and he plays dee dee da da dee da, you know, and it's going on just great. And it gets to the part that goes da 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 dee da 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 da, and it's going just great. And all of a sudden, this banshee-like squawk comes out of the oboe, and there on the floor, one of the keys dropped and fell off. Devastating. He had worked so hard. What he did was he stood up, stomped his foot, and said, "Shit," right to the audience. Well, you know, in the 1950s, that was an absolute no-no. Peter Dumbourian got so angry and was just saying, "You don't do that, you can't do this kind of thing," while he's waving his arm. And then Jerry Dillard, who's sitting on the outside in the trombone row, is sitting back there laughing as hard as he can laugh, and he falls over backwards. Which made Peter Dumbourian add all of the expletives you could think about at that time. So somehow get through that, but what a memorable moment in music. I could tell you lots more stories of Fortier because I absolutely loved it and would love to go through it again. I totally agree with Gary Hauser. I think the 50s was a great time to be alive in our country. So I'll stop with that.
Classmate Gary Hauser.
I'm Gary Hauser, and of course I had a wonderful time at Fortier in those days. I'm Gary Hauser, and I had an awfully good time at Fortier in those days. Didn't spend as much time studying as I should have, needless to say, but it was really, we had great friends, good times. 50s was a special time for America, I think, and it was really great. Thank you.
Classmate Jerry Carey.
Hi, I'm Jerry Carey. Fortier has always been very, very close to my heart. And although I've been a Yankee since I graduated, I come back as often as I can. Dick asked me to think about a story, and I thought I would share one with you that I think is very humorous. You may know I'm a musician, flute player, and that was my passion from the time I picked up the pipe until today. So we were playing, Peter Dumbourian chose a wonderful piece, I think it was for the spring concert in 1954, and it was the Bacchanal from Samson and Delilah. And we started around Christmas time. There was this wonderful kid by the name of Bill Hobbs, who was our oboe player. He had to work very, very hard to make the oboe sound like the oboe should sound. And I got the job of spending time with him. Yeah, I should say too, the solo was very demanding, very, very difficult.
Classmate Jerry Dillard.
I'm Jerry Dillard, and I really had some money in my pocket. That's usually excuse to have to spend a little more time with me. Cheryl Carey and I played a lot of music, and I've some great days. What's smart what I've been doing for the last few years. A couple of weeks ago, I was sitting on a patio drinking a cup of coffee. My wife said, "What are you doing again?" I said, "Nothing." She said, "That's what you did yesterday." I said, "I ain't through yet."
Classmate Mike Cowan.
Of all things was the Boys and Two Jacks. When they were, that place is still there too, believe it or not. But the Boys are the ones 50 cents or like $14 now.
You gotta hold the mic up. Remember to hold the mic up close to your mouth.
What?
Hold the mic up close to your mouth.
Okay, well I'm done.
Classmate Roy Sanji.
My remembrances of Fortier was, of course, with the ROTC, and I'm so glad to see John back there. And I don't know if you all remember when we would have a battalion review. You all familiar with that? Yeah. And we were the only ones that I can remember that shot guns off at Fortier. Blanks. And what we didn't have to go through to get that done. But it was a great experience and set me on my way. Knock on wood.
Classmate Pat Holmes Gisrick.
Hi, I'm Pat Holmes from Fortier, and I loved it. I have so such fond memories of Fortier and all of you being there. I remember when we were at McMain, that same famous march, and the march came down from Fortier down the street, and we were in class, but I remember somebody saying, you have to go. Everybody has to go out to the march. And we did. My grandchildren to this day don't know about that. So this is the first time I'm confessing to being in the march. But it was all fun.
Class of 53, Tommy Roberts.
I'm going to say just a couple of words. I'm from the class of 53, Tommy Roberts. And my wife said, I'm not as old as Wilbur, though. But anyway, I was reminded earlier in the evening of one of the fond memories that I had, and it was the slumber parties at the sororities game.
Classmate Alex Zimmer talks.
I'm Alex Zimmer. One story that I remember, probably not too many people remember this, but I was in, my homeroom teacher was Mr. Daughters. I think he taught journalism. And every Friday morning, he would come up and put on the board his prediction for the score of the football game that weekend. And so naturally he had Fortier winning every game. And then we'd come in on Monday morning and he'd have some kind of excuse what happened. That's one story I remember that probably not too many people remember.
Classmate Lou Boudreau talks.
My name's Lou Boudreau. There were a lot of less in their dedication and ability, but was Dr. Martin, who was a chemistry teacher, Ms. Harris, who was the physics teacher, and Uncle Henry, who was Henry, our drafting teacher. And those three areas were things that I was very interested in life and directed me in where I eventually went. And I attribute their teaching skills and the way they got your interest in the subject and had a great deal to helping me along in my direction in life and what I did. So the teachers of Fortier High School.
Classmate Peggy Boudreau talks.
Nice to be here from Florida. I have a lot of fond memories about Fortier, but I think I'll stick with the story about the girls. And I had so much fun. Pat and Gwen took care of us during our sugarette years. We had a great time, and I'm sure that most of us who participated in that can still kick up our heels.
Classmate Margaret Zanzler Krause talks.
Margaret Zanzler Krause from Jackson, Mississippi. And speaking about the band and Peter Orion, I was the key of the orchestra. And I theoretically played the violin. And Professor Kirsch was giving me private lessons during fourth period because I couldn't play the violin. And but he was very gracious. He had a double thumb, and of course you know the Kirsch family from the Blue Room. And he would say, Miss Zanzler, you can vibrate beautifully, but when we're in concert, do not touch the strings. So I vibrate and carry on and just have the best time, but I was not allowed to touch the strings. And I thought so many times, here I've carried that D violin case for 4 years and never touched the string.
Classmate John J-Mo Oshidla talks.
It was an airline strike. And I wonder how many of you, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, I wonder how many of you remember I
phoned Metairie Country Club from Champaign, Illinois, because I was there on a conference and couldn't get out of there on an airplane. And somebody answered, yeah, we're all here. Somebody went up to the mic and said, John Mocheever is calling from Illinois. And heard the cheer go up, and that made my day. One final memory from Fortier itself, of course. I hope I get through this in terms of diplomacy. My fondest memory of Fortier is the Key Club. And that organization was for those of us who were not worthy of being a member of a fraternity. Sorry, folks. And so therefore, for all of us who were otherwise than fraternity material, the Key Club was a wonderful home. I hope you know it was a wonderful organization. And, you know, here's the comedian of me that I hope you'll accept for one moment. Among my many honors, the one that I do cherish is the Key Club voted me the safest driver with the most thrill.
Classmate Walter Carl talks.
Good to see everybody. I'm Walt Carl, Carrollton, Georgia. Somebody stole my thunder on Two Jacks. I'm going to change this around a little bit. I'm going to do, and Barbara, you'll love this, I'm going to do my version of the LSU Tiger fight song. No, not really, not really. What I'm going to do is tell you a joke that you can tell your preacher. Okay, Ed? Why? Anyway, this is, everybody's heard of Little Johnny. Okay? Everybody's heard of Little Johnny. One morning, Monday morning, Johnny shows up at school and little girlfriend comes up and says, Johnny, what did you do over the weekend? He said, oh, my uncle and I, we went fishing, we caught 5 bass over 5 pounds. Wow. Then one of his little boyfriends comes up and said, Johnny, what'd you do over the weekend? He said, my uncle and I went fishing, we caught 10 bass over 10 pounds. Well, by this time, it's getting back to the teacher, who goes to the counselor goes to the principal. Principal says, you have him in my office 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Sure enough, Johnny shows up. Says, Johnny, you know, I live out in the suburbs, and after supper each night, I like to take a walk in the woods, you know, to kind of relax and get a little exercise. And I was walking last night, and I was almost back home, and I heard this rumbling in the bushes behind me. And I looked back, and about 25 yards coming straight for me was this black bear. And he got almost to me when this little chihuahua came out of nowhere, jumped on that bear, and killed that bear. And he said, now, do you believe that? And Johnny thought a minute, he said, why, sure I do. That was my dog, and that was the second bear he killed.
Classmate John Cottrera talks.
And when I started Fortier, some of the best days of my life and some of the best friends I've ever met and still are friends with. But I started Fortier and I had a 1940 Plymouth that I drove. And at lunchtime, everybody used to run out and pile up in the back of that Plymouth. And we'd go to Two Jacks, now Domalice's, and we'd get our sandwiches. And they were 18 inches long, 50 cents. For 75 cents, you could split half a roast beef and half a shrimp. Good days. I haven't been there lately, but I know they're hot.
Classmate Janet Hooley Soche talks.
Hi, I'm Janet Hooley-Soche, and I enjoyed my days at Fortier. I'm glad it's over with. Don't want to do it again. And biggest thrill, I guess, was the friends I made, plus being chosen on the homecoming. All right. Is that right? Thank you.
If they'd have had Common Core back then, a bunch of us wouldn't be here.
Classmate Linda Curette Bigay talks.
I had good years at Fortier, but one of the best moments for me was meeting a young man who had never graduated from high school but had been in the military, and he had come to Fortier to finish high school. And I remember, and I don't remember at what venue or anything that he addressed, that he said that all he wanted to do was to make people understand the right to vote is such a precious thing, that he would go vote even if it's just for dog catcher. And this so impressed me that I couldn't wait to register to vote. And I was determined that there would be a two-party system in the state of Louisiana, so I went down to City Hall of New Orleans and told them I wanted to register as a Republican, and they laughed at me because they said, "Don't you understand, you'll never get to vote." But I pursued that, and the first campaign I ever worked on was for Senator Barry Goldwater when he came to New Orleans. And those of you who know me and know I used to do the decorative stage settings for the plays and lots of the art things. My job for the Barry Goldwater campaign was to decorate every table on the floor of the municipal auditorium, which was 250 tables. I'm still active in this with the Republican women's groups in Louisiana, so any of you females who are interested and are good Republicans, come and see me. There's a club in your area. Thank you.
Classmate Betsy Swanson talks.
I'm Betsy Swanson, and I just wanted to say something about what the question was raised earlier. The question was raised earlier as to who was the teacher who led the operation of the school paper, Silver and Blue, and the yearbook. That was Mr. Darts, John Darts, D-A-R-D-I-S.
Class of 53, Leon White talks.
I don't belong to her, she's Glenda Dunn. We were born married. I don't remember ever not being married. Anyway, I'm from the class of 53. Another old one. And Gwen said I should come to this to, be around younger people. So that's why I'm here. But anyway, what I wanted to say about Fortier is somebody mentioned the professors, or the teachers. They were a blessing. They really were for all of us. And I particularly remember Doc Martin in chemistry. When I went to that chemistry class in the first day of class, he said he wanted to teach us a lesson about being a scientist. And so he just brought a flask out, and he said the flask was, he had gotten some cat urine in there from his house. Now, I don't know how you get cat urine from a cat, and he didn't explain that, but he did a lot of following. So, he had it in the flask, and he said, we had a football player in there, and big guy, and I'm not going to mention his name, but because he might still be around. But none of those football players graduated. So anyway, he called him down to the front, and he said, "Now watch what I'm going to do." He took the flask and he tilted it, and he got some cat urine on his finger, and he put it in the mouth. And he gave the football player, says, "Now you do it." And the football player does the same thing. And of course, he can't stand what he put in his mouth. And so Dr. Martin said, "Now here's the lesson. When I did it, I put the cat urine here, but I..." That's what I learned at Fortier. Now I want you to meet the football player.
Class of 54, Pete Fabaka talks.
Just like to say hello. Hello. Oh, you got to press something.
No, speak right into it.
Hello. Oh, yeah. I just like to say one thing for all of you. Here's to those who wish us well. Those who don't can't go to the well. There's another side to that.
Classmate Gene Umstock talks.
I'm Gene Umstock, and I graduated in 55, and I did real good.
Faculty member Stewart speaks.
You can hear it? Like that? Oh, all right. Thank you. The lone survivor of the faculty, so what I have to say to you is this. There was that March before I came to Fortier, when Fortier exited and went down to McMain, and the McMain and Fortier went down to school. 2 years later, we were talking to some of the students who had sex-segregated schools and the co-ed schools. Would you believe the overwhelming majority of both boys and girls we talked to preferred sex-segregated schools? Amen. Much to the surprise of some people the other night when I was telling this to them. But the fact is, some girl had to learn how to play a bass drum. Some boy had to learn how to be the secretary of a club. And that was some of the sex foolishness that went on in schools where certain jobs in the school got assigned to certain sexes of students. The fact is that it being my love of history is those things which we agree upon to remember. Today we want to remember that we were all in favor of co-ed schools. There was a time when a lot of people were not in favor of co-ed schools. 2 years ago, everybody was in favor of core curriculums. Today we're all against core curriculums, depending upon who you listen to. The fact remains is that the only thing I would like to suggest is that somebody last night said, do you remember a raid that the military pulled off, and they couldn't even remember the name of the pharmacy, called Richmond's. They have a lockup from National Avenue. And some of the guys in the military unit, we all went up there. On the activity period after the second period, you know, a lot of people snuck out of school instead of going to a club class. And we brought about 40 prisoners back to McMain. I took to Fortier from Richmond's pharmacy. And she said, yes, I guess I was there, wasn't I? Miss McShane had her own reputation and whatnot, but I'll tell you this. That day she said, we want to do this, but we don't want anybody to get really in trouble for it. So do it with a little bit of fun. And that's what we did. We had boys in the backyards and other properties along the street. Why nobody ever called the police, we'll never know, but it was fun. You all were a great class. All the classes at that time in schools were a far better thing than we can remember today. Except that we ought to all be involved in trying to make these schools today as good as we could be. Thank you. And we all hope to be here in 2020. My son, who's at Ben Franklin's homecoming reunion this weekend, when he saw my packet on Friday night, said, Dad, you all are optimistic. I said, what are you talking about? He said, this thing says, see you in 2020. I said, somebody's got to be here.
Classmate Tess Lansing Shute speaks.
We just want to say hello. So good to see, well, I can't say you're all familiar
faces because I didn't remember everybody, but it's good to see classmates from Lafayette, where I was there in the 7th and 8th grade. I always lived in Metairie. By special permission, I went to school in the city. Then, of course, at Maine, Tess Lansing, and then Fortier, of course. But I was at the 25th, and that was the last reunion. Learned about the 50th 2 days after it occurred, unfortunately. Couldn't come to the 55th, but couldn't miss this one. I live in Brooklyn, New York now. I've lived in 7 different states. One of them, of course, the first one, Louisiana. So I've had the experience of living in different parts of the country and have enjoyed it. When I went away to college in Indiana, they always teased me about sounding like a Southerner. When I went home at Christmas, they accused me of sounding like a Yankee. And I ended up marrying a Yankee. So I've been in the Northeast most of my life now. But anyway, thank you for this opportunity to come back and to see so many of you. And I wish you all well.
Classmate Jerry Sturm O'Neill talks.
Can you hear me? No. I'm Jerry Sturm O'Neill. I live in California. I'm Jerry Sturm O'Neill. I live in California. Please save your water. I just wanted to say a tribute to this gentleman over here, Lieutenant Stewart, because many of you probably don't know. Okay, you probably don't know. He taught a geography class in summer school to a whole bunch of us. I'm not from Fortune, and it was great. He knew more than military. So thank you.
Classmate Gloria Walker Conlon talks.
My name is Gloria Walker Conlon. I love Fortier. I didn't know if y'all knew I was the first girl to take mechanical drawing. And I was the only girl in class for 3 years with Mr. Aronson. And it was a wonderful experience. I wanted to be an architect, but I couldn't go to college. But anyway, in the year 2000, I finally designed my house and moved into it. So it only took me a few years. And I've become, since my husband has passed away, I've become very active in so many things. I don't have my husband to tell me anymore. Shut up, Gloria. So anyway, since I've been doing this, and it's schools, and of course it's the water, the aquifers, and it's been quite an experience. And I have had a state senator, a state representative, and a parish police juror. 3 of them threatened to sue me if I pass this information around. And I told them, go ahead, sue me, but what I'm sending is the truth. Well, I never heard from them. But anyway, Fortier and y'all were just absolutely wonderful experience. And where I live in Vermilion Parish, I'm proud to say, and excuse my language, but they call me the shit stirrer from Mo. That's a community. And that I'm very proud
of. Class of 57, Roy Perrin talks.
I'm Roy Perrin, class of 1957. We're invited guests. I've got my wife, class of 1959. It's Kay Munch. We're invited by my sister-in-law, Ed, and brother-in-law, Ed. But all of y'all are mentors to us. The classes before us, we look up to. You laid the groundwork. We followed. And what you see here today as a member and past president of Metairie Country Club, we're glad to have you.
Classmate Chris Bertucci speaks.
I want to thank y'all all for being here, being friends. I think I have some great memories. I'm going to restrict it. That one of the first and best teachers that I had at Fortier was Miss Collins, Washington Collins. I had her 2 times, freshman and senior. And she empowered me to speak my mind by asking me if I agreed or didn't agree with something she said. Obviously, my face betrayed me, but I didn't agree with what she said. So I answered, and she continued that throughout my term in the class. But also many other memories, not only of sports and friends, for which I thank all of you for being friends, but also want to cite something that had not been cited. We didn't belong to a fraternity, but we started one in Fortier. Some of y'all may not know. The FFF, Fortier55 fraternity. And it was a demand commodity that people were coming in right and left. And our claim to fame, I think, is that we were independent thinkers, independent doers, and that we had drinking parties, and lots of them. And some of people who came in probably were the worst for it, somewhere down the line. But all of you contributed to our success individually and collectively, and I thank you for the many good experiences and friends that I had there.
Classmate Merlin Bonney speaks.
Anyway, I can remember in the past when it was all boys, and when I started Fortier. Speak into the microphone. When I started Fortier, it was all boys at that time, and then they had some fella, I don't know who it was, but put a bag over his little Crossley car. He drove over to Newcomb, which was all girls at that time, and he drove into the gate, running after the girls with his little car into the volleyball area. Next thing you know, we get Mr. Lee, who was the principal there, on a loudspeaker, trying to find out who the heck this guy was, what's going on. That was really a funny thing to happen. And the other thing I can remember, me and Mr. Martin's class was chemistry. We were doing some chemistry experiments, and we were just getting our rings for graduation. Somewhere along the line, I put some chemical on my ring, and it turned. And Mr. Martin said, well, I guess it's going to have to stay that way. But he finally corrected it. Anyway, I'm really proud to be on that school. It was a wonderful school, and it was a great education, but one of the better schools in the city was Fortier.
All right, I've been informed, well, not informed, I've been instructed in no uncertain terms by Barbara that
This is the end of our 60th reunion. Fortier Class 1955. Look forward to seeing you guys at the 65th. Adios.